Hello and welcome to the Voice of Iron. And on this session, I'll be reading and ranting about the Spider light Battlemech. First, I'll be going over the canon information that we have from SARNA, and then I'll be giving my personal thoughts and experiences with this mech. Description: The Spider was the first Battlemech produced by Newhart Industries, designed in 2650 as a light reconnaissance and attack mech to be used by Star League Defense Force Special Operations Forces such as the Blackhearts. Beyond exceeding all of the SLDF's minimum requirements, Newhart had actually designed the Spider before receiving the Star League's request for proposals and were ready to begin production immediately, factors which helped the company win the contract very quickly. In terms of maneuverability, the Spider has a ground speed comparable to a Locust and can outjump either the vaunted Wasp or Stinger light mechs. Built with top-of-the-line reliable parts, sophisticated reconnaissance equipment, and an energy weapon payload which allowed for extended operations without resupply, the Spider was a great success. While not produced in large numbers, it could be rapidly manufactured, which enabled its service to the end of the Star League. Newhart's Spider factory on New Earth was destroyed in 2776 as part of the Ameris Civil War, and very few Spiders ended up in the hands of the successor states when the Star League dissolved. As their numbers began to dwindle during the Succession Wars, entire offensive operations were conducted simply to secure spare parts for these mechs. So rare was the Spider that Wolf's Dragoons were notable for having an entire lance of Spiders, albeit split among the various regiments. This trend towards extinction was finally reversed when the Free Worlds League was able to secure the schematics for the Spider, and, in a deal with Nimikachi Fusion Products Limited, the company was given exclusive control of the mech's technical specifications in exchange for building them for the Free Worlds League. Nimikachi began building new Spiders from their factory on Temitagi, and later expanded their facilities on Lapida II to produce them as well. This resulted in the Free Worlds League and Draconis Combine having the largest number of Spiders in active service in the late Succession War period. Recovery of lost Star League technology inspired Nimikachi to update the Spider with new upgrades, resulting in the improved SDR-5V and the derivative Venom. While the Free Worlds League did not express much interest in these mechs, Nimikachi found ready buyers among the other great houses, in particular the Draconis Combine, which had lost a large number of light mechs during the clan invasion and brought up both local and foreign-made Spiders to replenish their ranks. The word of Blake also expressed an interest in these Spiders and brought several to outfit their military. These Spiders were used as part of the Blakist conquest of Terra and were later gifted to the Protectorate Militia, where they fought in the Jihad. Starting in 3067, the Spider was restyled by Nimikachi, which allowed the addition of an ejection system to the cockpit of the new SDR-7K, 7K2, and 7KC models, though when rebuilding their destroyed Temitagi plant during the Dark Age era, Nimikachi would revert to the classic SLDF appearance and, once again, precluded an ejection seat. Weapons and equipment. The standard Spider SDR-5V carries a very light armament of 2 Aberdovey Mark III medium lasers mounted in its center torso next to the fusion engine. While more expensive than the common Martel lasers mounted on other mechs, they are of superior quality and require very little maintenance. Waste heat generated by the lasers are handled by the standard number of 10 single heatsinks mounted in the fusion engine. 3.5 tons of armor provide some measure of protection, though most Spider pilots agree that speed is the best defense. The unique armor alignment of the front of the Spider is what gave the mech its name, and this spider web pattern is further emphasized by a bright red fiberglass sealant in the seams between armor plates. The Spider carries a grand total of 8 jump jets, 4 each in the left and right torso, giving it an incredible jumping distance of 240 meters. Using cutting-edge components, the jump jets can pivot the mech in mid-flight while still reaching its original landing point, thanks to its advanced computer tracking. The ability for the Spider to twitch in the air gives it greater protection, as even the most advanced targeting computers can have a hard time acquiring a lock. The OP communication system and targeting tracking system are fully integrated in the Spider, meaning both verbal communications and sensor readings can be transmitted back to headquarters. This advanced computer setup even includes an entertainment system for those long, lonely nights on recon duty. However, it also has a serious drawback in that the system combined with the head's armor layout leaves no space for a proper ejection system. The pilot must manually reach the lower hatch on their own in order to exit the mech. Many Spider pilots therefore practice quickly exiting the mech during their downtime, especially those variants which carry vulnerable ammunition liable to cook off. And speaking of variants, the SDR-5V Spider is one of 2 official variants originally developed by Newhart, and was introduced in 2853. Geared towards anti-infantry work, it removes one of the medium lasers and replaces it with a single flamer in the right arm. After the Star League fell, was primarily used by the Federated Suns, and the variant was normally used by militia units since others saw its mission hunting infantry as a waste of good mech. Also, I find it very interesting that the 5D was introduced in 2853 when the last factory was taken out in 2776. The SDR-5K. The 5K Spider is another of 2 official variants originally developed by Newhart and was introduced in 2850. Also geared towards anti-infantry work, it removes one of the medium lasers and replaces it with 2 arm-mounted machine guns fed by 1 ton of ammo stored in the center torso. To make room for its ammunition, the mech sacrifices 60 meters of its jump capability by removing 2 jump jets. While primarily used by the Draconis Combine during the Succession Wars, the variant was normally used by militia units since others saw its mission of hunting infantry as a waste of a good mech. Now the SDR-7K is an upgrade of the base design introduced by Nimikachi in 3067, and based on the success of other revitalized classic designs. It's built using an endo-steel structure, 5.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, and a light fusion engine in place of the standard model, and carries 2 medium pulse lasers. Perhaps most critically, Nimikachi was able to finally install an ejection system in the 7K. The SDR-7K2, the SDR-7KR, this Jihad-era refit first spotted in 3074, removes a medium pulse laser and mounts an experimental Angel ECM suite in its place. The SDR-7K2 is a Scout Hunter variant of the 7K, introduced in 3068 by Nimikachi. Its jump capability is dropped to 210 meters, and its armoring reduced to 5 tons, but it now carries a diverse optics Sunbeam ER large laser. The SDR-7KC, built in 3074 after the destruction of Nimikachi's Temitagi factory, the 7KC drops the 7K's medium pulse lasers, replacing them with a light PPC and a C3 slave unit. The SDR-7M was Nimikachi's upgrade of the venerable Spider with recovered Star League technology. Released in 3051, it uses a Crucius II deluxe endo-steel chassis and 3 tons of Callan FWL Special ferrofibrous armor, freeing up weight to replace the 2 medium lasers with 2 Tronel 7 medium pulse lasers. Many of the components were also replaced with proprietary technology, including Rawlings 75 jump jets, an Omicron 4002 networking channel, and a TRSS Eagle Eye targeting system. One thing they could not do, however, was include an ejection system for the pilot. The SDR-5V, a post-Jihad variant developed by the Combine in 3084, the SDR-5V uses a compact gyro and a 240-rated XL fusion engine to maintain its ground speed while still allowing it to carry 4 tons of ferrofibrous armor. The extra weight left was used to swap the medium lasers of the stock Spider for a single, torso-mounted, capacitor-enhanced, snub-nose PPC. The SDR-8M is a simple upgrade of the 7M developed by the Free Worlds League militia in 3060, which replaces the single heatsinks with double-strength versions. Otherwise, both variants are completely identical. The SDR-8R, a post-Jihad variant developed by Krupp Armament Works for the Republic of the Sphere in 3084. The production model 8R was based on the prototype SDR-8X that used during the liberation of Terra. Built on an endosteel chassis and powered by a smaller 210-rated light fusion engine, this reduced its ground speed. The SDR-8R's 10 Pitban LFT-20X improved jump jets gave it amazing maneuverability. Carrying 10 double heatsinks allowed the 8R to fire its twin diverse optics ER medium lasers and jump without fear of overheating. Boasting a very different look, the redesigned 8R was also notable for being one of the first Spiders to include an ejection system. Wait. Except for the original 7K. The SDR-8X, an experimental prototype that saw service in 3078 with Devil and Stone's coalition during the Jihad, the SDR-8X was clad in nearly double the armor of the later 8R and mounted an experimental inner sphere technology, the partial wing. The SDR-8XR. This version of the Spider was a field refit of the 8X. The medium pulse lasers were removed and replaced with 5 ER small lasers. And for close-in combat, the Spider carries a sword. It retains the partial wing. That sounds cool. The SDR-9M is a further Dark Age evolution of the 8M. Utilizing light ferrofibrous, endosteel, and an XL engine, leaves enough room to mount 2 medium variable speed pulse lasers, one in each side torso. These weapons give the Spider a very powerful bite up close, but the range no better than standard medium lasers. This loadout can leave it outranged by most other mechs on the modern battlefield, but its speed and maneuverability help mitigate this. Repeated firing of both lasers and jumping can overburden the mech's 10 double heatsinks. The SDR-10K. This variant removes the standard weaponry and replaces it with a single, large, re-engineered laser, and replaces the armor with ballistic reinforced armor. And finally, the SDR-C. This Draconis Combine variant, introduced in 3054 and based on the 7M, swaps out one of the medium pulse lasers for a standard medium laser and a C3 slave unit. All of the Spiders have the following design quirks. They are easy to maintain, they're nimble jumpers, and of course, unless otherwise specified, they have no ejection system. And now, personal notes. After some careful thought, I believe that I can safely call the Spider my favorite light mech to pilot. Yes, I still love the Wolfhound, and yes, the Commando will always hold a special place in my heart. And of course, the Locust remains incredibly fun, and as always, the Urban Mech is something that I absolutely adore. But when it comes to the sheer enjoyment that I get from piloting a light mech, the speed, the thrill, the danger, and just the sheer happiness that comes from actually succeeding in one, I really can't beat the Spider. Not only is this thing still light enough and under-armored enough to where I can consider it a great feat to actually succeed at a dangerous mission with this thing, but it's also competent enough to where if you're a good pilot, and a little lucky, you really can regularly accomplish all sorts of mission types with this. Now, it does have a bit of a narrow profile, and I don't mean that in the rules sense, but we'll get to its fun rules in a minute. I mean that in the sense of it has a very narrow scope of what it can do really well. Missions that require speed, efficiency, and stealth. This thing excels in. And you can even do a little bit of assassination depending on what you're assassinating and where, and whether or not your assassination target is also in a mech. But regardless, this thing is very, very fun to pilot. Rather than giving an explicit and specific story, let me tell you an experience that is shockingly common with this mech, at least in terms of when I've piloted it in MechWarrior 5. I will be running along and, completing a raid mission of some type. I'll be going through, I've taken out the first series of targets in one encampment, and I'm moving on towards the next, and of course, I have absolutely peeved the defenders, so they start launching air assets. I'm talking about AC-2 fire, flying all around me, striking the ground because there's an Igor in the air, or there are warrior units that are flying in. So what I'll do, and again, this happens regularly for how cool it is, I'll be running full tilt towards the next location. I will jump up in the air, pivot myself all the way around in the Spider, fire both medium lasers directly at whatever is behind me in the air, usually an Igor's engine or a warrior or whatever, take it down, and still have enough time to pivot back around and face forward again, or face a little sideways to hide behind some nearby rocks or buildings or whatever it may be for cover, and continue running towards my next target. It's such a cool maneuver to where individually it would be a really neat story to tell about jumping up, pivoting around, taking down a target midair. But this mech is so cool and so maneuverable that that's not a specific story. That happens regularly when I take this thing out on missions. And that's not me bragging about how cool I am as a pilot, that's me bragging about how capable this thing is as a chassis for its maneuverability. Now, thankfully, that's not just limited to MechWarrior 5. I mentioned that I'd get into its unique quirks in a minute, and while it doesn't have the narrow/low profile quirk, which, a lot of light mechs do have, it does have something very unique to it, and, in my opinion, a little more flavorful. It has Nimble Jumper. And I'm just going to read this verbatim in Battletech, so for those of you playing on the table, listen to this. When a mech with this quirk jumps, it need not follow the most direct path to its target hex. Instead, it may deviate from that path by up to 1 hex of its controller's choice, assuming the mech has the jumping MP required, of course. Additional heat for such a jump is generated as normal for the jump jet type in use. If a mech jumps in this fashion, attacks against the mech receive an additional +1 target movement modifier, a total of +2 for jumping, instead of the normal +1. The extra hex traveled is also factored into the mech's target movement modifier as normal. However, attacks made by the jumping mech receive the same additional target number modifier, a total +4 for jumping, instead of +3. But did you hear that? That means that this mech, which is already capable of jumping over 7, which, for those not too familiar with the tabletop, is the threshold for actually being more difficult to hit, but with that extra 8th hex, it can do that and pivot an additional 1 out of range, making it even more difficult to hit. To just break that down, if you moved all 8 using this nimbleness, to kind of junt yourself to the side, or even just 7 because it does factor in total, right? And you used this nimble jumper quirk. All right, you've moved 7 or more, that's already +3 to hit. You have jumped, that's already up to +4. And now you use this nimble jumper, that is +5 to hit. And again, for those of you not familiar with the tabletop game, the highest that you can roll is a 12 to hit something, right? So even if you have some additions, you now need to cancel out, or at the very least factor in, a +5, and most people have to deal with at least an additional +1 on their end from walking, let alone running at +2, and even if they're standing still as a sniper, they're going to have to deal with range problems unless they have a quirk to cancel it out. So in short, it's really, really difficult to hit this thing on the table. And I think the video games do a pretty good job of reflecting that as well. Again, maneuvering midair, jumping around, bobbing and weaving. Oh my gosh, and that's not even factoring in upgrades. One of the first things I do to the Spider when I get the technology to do it is have my technicians give it a longer burn time, a shorter cooldown on those jump jets, a greater jumping ability, better thrust. I basically just max out this thing's capabilities when it comes to the jump jets. And I would recommend that anyone who is a bit of a flyboy at heart do the same. But even aside from flying, this thing can still perform just about as well as a laser locust. It's got 2 medium lasers, so already you're off to a decent start. It can run just as fast as a locust can, and it can bob and weave on the ground just the same. I'm not gonna lie, if we were talking about a grounded version of a Spider versus a locust, the locust does eke it out, but that's talking about a completely grounded, that's taking away its best ability, and even then, it's eking it out. Now, in universe, it is pretty dangerous to pilot one of these things, because until you get until about the I believe it was the late 3050s, 3060s, you don't get the option to eject. Now, it's not necessarily a death sentence, but for most pilots, not being able to eject may as well be, especially if you get a core hit, and especially if you're riding one of the variants with ammunition. Personal note, I don't really take the variants with ammunition. I'm not saying they don't have their use, they're great against anti-personnel operations, but for me, it's lasers all day. I love the laser variant. Plus, I mean, putting the lasers in the middle of the mech, in the center torso, in the part where it is literally the last thing you're gonna lose before you are out of the fight anyway, it just makes sense to me. Like, yeah, I'm not saying that you want to lose your arms or anything, but if you're one of those people who's just like, I need to live, no matter the cost, then you can pivot yourself and use your arms basically as free armor. Now, you don't want to lose your side torsos, because that's where your jump jets are, but to the same degree, I mean, you don't have much armor as it is, so having the extra protection that comes from putting everything critical dead center, pretty much, is very, very smart on behalf of the designers. So I prefer the base variant over something that, say, has arm-mounted machine guns or anything like that. Plus, in lore, it's just such a cool machine. I mean, this thing was designed for special forces operations, and fun fact, I didn't see it mentioned in the actual SARNA article, so I'll go ahead and mention this. The company that makes it, or rather the company that originally made it, Newhart Interstellar Industries, they didn't start out as a mech manufacturer. They are an aerospace company. Quite literally, if I remember the story correctly, Newhart Interstellar Industries had been working on aerospace for a great many years, and they saw the popularity of mechs, so in the background, they started thinking, hey, so what if we designed a mech? What would a mech look like that we designed? And so they started creating this mech that was based around jumping and being nimble. It was light, it was fast, it was straightforward. Funny enough, it's the exact weight that would be necessary for the minimum of a lamb, 30 tons. So I don't know if their thought process went to lambs at any point, but it ended up just being a traditional battle mech. Regardless, when the Starlink contract came in, looking for a light scout mech capable of great maneuverability and potential recon operations, they looked at what they had sitting on their blueprint table, they looked at the contract and went, dude, we have something for that already. The other companies didn't even get a chance to submit a design concept before Newhart basically won, because they were like, not only do we have a design concept, we've got the facilities to get this thing started, because we were thinking about doing it anyway, and instantly won that. And honestly, just aerospace company pivots to make the coolest, like, best jumping mech for centuries. That's so neat to me. I like this thing. I like its lore. I like its rules. I like what it's capable of. It's very mechanically strong on the table and decently mechanically strong in something like MechWarrior 5, while at the same time still being dangerous to drive in, because it's still a light mech, it still cannot put out nearly as much firepower as some of its peers, and it can still die to one or two well-placed shots. And I'm not just talking about headshots. It feels like it's something that is strong, but not so overpowered as to be an instant pick. And it very much encourages you to lean into its strengths of speed maneuverability, while at the same time giving you a personal challenge to drive. And those of you who've listened to my channel for a while know that I like a mech that comes with a challenge. Because if you just treat this thing like a Locust, it's not going to go well for you. If you just treat this thing like any other mech and jump just a little bit, it's probably not going to go as well as it could, and you might die pretty quickly. But if you treat this thing like the insane jumping machine that it is, I think you're going to have a very fun time, and your enemy is going to have a very frustrating time trying to take you down. It strikes that nice balance between it is fun for you to play with and challenging for the enemy to take down, without, I feel, crossing over into that dangerous threshold of you're just annoying your opponent and you're not being a nice player. Because there are designs like that, but this, I feel, is not one of them. It's tricky, it's difficult, but it's not so much of a threat if you can't kill it to where your opponent has to take it out. But that said, if they ignore it, they are in for a world of hurt, because 2 medium lasers is still not something you want to ignore in most battles, especially when they can move that fast, and if it's objective-based, they need to take this down. Either way, in conclusion, the Spider is really, really cool. On the table, in the video games, in the lore, I love the Spider. And again, no disrespect to my other picks of fantastic light mechs, and light mechs that, like, the Wolfhound, I've loved it for years. The Commando, I have a particular soft spot for. The Urban Mech is one of the most enjoyable mechs just for how niche it is, but the Spider, I think after some long deliberation, truly, the Spider is my favorite light mech to drive and to use. So, with all of that said, that concludes today's Reading and Rant, and thank you for listening to my voice.